Misachika is a creepy otaku simp who plays League of Legends and sometimes works as a Discord mod just like you. Everything changed when the most popular Russian girl falls in love with him. But she isn't just any popular girl. She is so popular that all the students stare at her, envying the ground she walks on. One morning, Walmart Timothy Chalamet walks up to her thinking his $2 haircut is enough to raise her up, but Alia rejects him immediately. The idiot tries to save face by switching tactics to getting her number. However, Alia shatters his self-worth and tells him she has zero interest in him, leaving him speechless. The rest of the school lose any hope of bagging her since she just roasted the hell out of the most coveted boy in school. Later, Alia arrives in class and finds Masashika catching up on his sleep, so she kicks the moron awake and asks if he was up all night watching anime again. He admits to the allegations but explains that he had something important to do after watching. Alia thinks he was on some Twitter thread, but it turned out that the virgin loser was staying up watching anime recaps. Alia calls him insane, but Masashika insists that if it's for the culture, they'll gladly be put in straitjackets. She then stares as he yawns wide enough to accommodate an eggplant. Then she says something in Russian. He asks what it was and she says it means he looks pathetic. Their first period is chemistry, something these two have plenty of, and when Masashika realizes he forgot to bring his textbook, he joins tables with Alia to share hers while the teacher drones on. Masashika fights to stay awake, but when he loses, Alia sticks him with her pen, causing him to raise his hand. The teacher asks what the answer is, so Masashika looks to Alia for help. She points him to an answer and Masashika confidently repeats it, but he ends up being dead wrong. The teacher then turns to Alia to bail him out and she instantly gives up the correct answer. Masashika can't believe the betrayal and asks why she would throw him under the bus like that. Alia claims she was pointing out the question number, but Masashika just knows she's full of shit, especially with that evil smile. Suddenly, she repeats that word in Russian, which catches Masashika off guard. When he asks what she said, she calls him stupid. But Masashika has a secret. He's been able to understand her Russian this entire time, and she was actually calling him a cutie. This rocks his whole world trying to figure out what she means, but she continues to play dumb. He's able to understand her since he played with a Russian girl when he was a kid, but he never thought he'd find himself being rizzed up by a Russian baddie who doesn't know he can understand her. If he admitted he knew, she'd probably die of embarrassment and he can't afford funeral expenses. Later, Alia catches Masashika messing with his phone and reminds him it's forbidden to use it unless it's an emergency, but he just ignores her. Frustrated, Alia grabs the phone to see what this filthy degenerate is up to anyway. When she sees the goddess of the moon with silver hair, she hands the phone back, annoyed. Then she switches to Russian and says her hair is silver too, and calls him a cheater. Masashika catches that and starts to glitch, but when he asks what she said, she calls him a game junkie. The airhead immediately loses focus and starts explaining how he's not a true junkie since he doesn't have his own Twitch stream. Alia simply looks away, realizing there's no hope for him. Later, Masashika has lunch with his friends when they notice the student council walk in. Alia, the treasurer, Yuki, the spokesperson, and Miria, the secretary and Alia's sister. The boys agree that the Kujo sisters are smoking hot, but Miria turns down everyone who asks her out, saying she's dating someone already. Olia says she's got no shot with her since his head is shaped like a doorknob, so Takeshi calls him out on being full of it just because he's friends with Oya. Meanwhile, the girls look around for a place to sit, and when Yuki spots Masashika's uninterested look, she asks if they can sit with them. The boys agree, so the girls join them, and Yuki notices Masashika got ramen just like her. However, when she realizes the food tastes like battery acid, she suggests bringing it up with the student council. Masashika warns her not to bring personal preferences into admin matters, but she fondly tells him she's only joking. At that moment, Olia looks at Yuki like she's some shit stain and asks if they're friends. Yuki explains that they've known each other since childhood, since they went to the same preschool. When Masashika asks if the girls have friends too, Yuki says she'd like to be, but Alia warns her that being friends with her isn't exactly fun. At that point, the boys decide to take their lunch elsewhere and Takeshi explains the girls are just too shiny for their virgin eyes. Once the dead weight has been dropped, Yuki inches close to Masashika and asks if he's considered her idea of joining the student council, but Masashika says he would rather watch that 2010 Airbender movie we don't talk about. Yuki tells Alia that Masashika used to be her vice president back in middle school and he's very capable, so Alia switches to Russian and says she doesn't have to tell her that. Later, Yuki says her goodbyes and Alia says she's surprised any girl that won't be friends with him. Masashika points out that she's his friend, which surprises Ilya, who agrees and suddenly walks away, leaving Masashika confused. Later, Masashika dreams of the good old days when he used to play with a blonde Russian girl. When he wakes up, he remembers how he was such a simp that he studied Russian just to talk to her. yet he doesn't remember her name. The next morning, Masashika goes to class early and tidies up before everyone else arrives. Holia is the first show up and thinks hell must have frozen over for his bum ass to have woken up early. Masashika notices the dirt on her socks and asks if she stepped in a puddle, but she sits down and explains that she got splashed with mud by a passing truck. She suddenly changes the subject and asks if he'll join the student council after all, but he insists that he'd rather swallow nails. Holia tries to ask something else but gets embarrassed and tells him to forget it. She then begins to remove her socks, which makes Masashika weak in the knees. When Elia sees how shy he is, she gets a culture idea and tells Masashika to get her spare sock from her locker. Masashika reluctantly agrees, but when she tells him to put it on her, he tries to chicken out, but she says it would be a nice treat for him for helping her get it. Alaya switches to Russian and says it's for her too. And at this point, Masashika starts wondering if she's just using him to release her stress or something. When he asks what she said, she says she called him a coward, so Masashika grabs her foot and decides to do as she's asked. Alia starts freaking out, saying she wasn't ready yet, but Masashika tells her to stop squirming so he can get it in. However, he accidentally touches her in her restricted area, so she immediately kicks him in the face and gives him a peek of heaven in the process. The man goes down, but it was worth the treat. Later, Olia gives him cold shoulder, so he approaches her and tries to apologize, but she calls him a leg fetish scum in Russian. She then says she's not mad at him and apologizes for kicking him. But when she tries to see if he's okay, he deflects and thanks her for giving him a preview of the Promised Everland. Olia is beyond embarrassed and decks him. Then she turns to run away while he chases after her. They run around school for a while, but 10 minutes later, she finally gives in. Masashika apologizes for taking it too far and offers her favorite drink as a peace offering. Ali is touched that she noticed and switches to Russian to ask if he wants a sip. Masashika freezes when he realizes she wants to indirectly kiss him, but he chickens out and pretends not to know what that means. As usual, she changes the translation and laughs to herself, thinking he doesn't understand a word she's saying. Some days later, Masashika meets up with Yuki in a storage space, and when the two start goofing off, Alia pops out and laments about being the third wheel. The girls apparently need help sorting out the storage room, so Masashika starts by bringing down some board games, which cues Yuki to brag about her last win. Alia tells the cringy couple to get back to work, then switches to Russian to wish she gets some attention too. Masashika shivers on the spot as Ilya continues to beg for him to come, while Elia thinks she's really being slick. Afterward, they head to the student council office, where the president comes in and introduces himself as Kenzaki, saying he's heard a lot about him. Masashika looks at him like an unfinished mappa project and thinks it's no wonder he is the president. However, when he tries to leave, Kenzaki insists on buying him dinner to show his appreciation. Masashika tries to decline, but Yuki tells him he should accept since he's only going home to meet tumbleweeds. Kenzaki wonders how Yuki could possibly know what Masashika will need at home, but Yuki simply says they go way back. Kenzaki then invites the girls to dinner with them, and they accept. At dinner, Kenzaki praises the group for finishing their tasks so quickly, so Yuki starts hyping Masashika up as the reason why. Kenzaki asks him if he'd like to join the student council, but Masashika declines, once again saying he'd rather step on a Lego. Kenzaki tries convincing him by saying it'll greatly improve his recommendation, but Masashika only cares about recommending a manga help Jizu that night. Yuki adds to the pestering, so Masashika asks why she even needs him when she's issuing to win, but Kenzaki reveals that's not true, especially since Alia is planning to run too. This surprises Masashika, but Alia confirms that she'll be running for president too. After dinner, Kenzaki suggests Masashika walk Alia home while he takes care of Yuki, so they split up. Oya seems particularly cold to Masashika, and when she reaches her stop, she leaves without her usual Russian simping. Masashika arrives at home and can immediately tell he's not alone. Inside, Yuki casually relaxes on the couch, so he asks what she's doing there, but she ignores him and reads through her favorite manga, hoping its main couple is from Alabama. Masashika calls her out on pretending to be childhood friends in school, but Yuki insists that being siblings doesn't contradict that. They then refocus on the cultured comics she's reading as she demonstrates that otakus aren't born, they're made. The next morning, Masashika wakes up to find Yuki on top of him, but he tells her he's not interested in going Targaryen with her. Later, they head to the mall together and Yuki checks out some clothes while Masashika feels his lungs closing when he sees the price tag. While they shop, Masashika asks Yuki that she's also noticed a silver something at the corner of his eye, so Yuki says that she's way ahead of him and noticed the peeping Tom a while ago. Masashika wonders how to deal with the situation delicately, but Yuki doesn't give a shit and just walks right up to Alia. Alia tries to play it cool and claims that she'd only seen them a few moments ago, but of course no one buys it. Yuki tries to invite Alia to lunch with them, but when Masashika tries to stop her, Alia wonders what the big deal is. Yuki explains it's a spicy food joint and tells her not to come if she can't handle it, but Masashika tries to be honest and warns her that it's like eating da bomb from Hot Ones. Olia insists that she'll go, ignoring Masashika's warnings, and moments later she stands before the gates of hell looking like she died while doing meth. Alia starts to have second thoughts, so Yuki starts running her mouth, making her double down. When they head in, Yuki explains what flavor of hell awaits her in each of their dishes, so Masashika tries to save her by going for the mildest option on the menu. The girls decide to go with his order too, and while they wait, Ilya points out how boyish Yuki looks for a change. Yuki informs her that she was in bed with Masashika that morning, causing him to spit his drink. While the virgins in the restaurant eavesdrop on what it's like to get some action, Alia looks to Masashika an explanation, but what he says sounds the same as saying she slipped and fell into bed with him. Finally, their order for 3 pools of blood arrives, and just the sight alone makes Alia jump. However, not one to back down from a challenge, she pulls out the noodles and starts to eat. Suddenly, the spices hit her like Truck Kuman's distant cousin, but when Masashika tries to ask if she's seen double yet, she insists that she's fine. She starts crying as she begs for help in Russian, and every time Masashika tries to help, she refuses. Just then, Yuki, who's no better than the devil, offers her a spice to make her food even hotter. Masashika realizes Yuki's doing this on purpose and tries to rescue Alia, but the idiot refuses and pours some of it in. When she takes a bite, she screams Bloody Mary, and they end up outside. Masashika says Yuki went off to buy something, and it's just 2 of them now, so he asks if she wants some ice cream. Alia finally cools off when Masashika suddenly asks her why she wants to be student council president. Alia says she doesn't need a reason to aim higher, so Masashika asks if she has a running mate. She says she doesn't need one and would probably ask a random stranger just cause of the rules. But when she switches to Russian, she wishes he would run with her. This reminds Masashika of a time when he watched a girl, ugly, cry over losing the elections, making him feel bad. Ilya asks if he's got any plans after that, and Masashika says he doesn't. And Yuki won't be back for a while, so Ilya asks him to follow her shopping. Yuki says it would imply a close relationship between them, but when he realizes that Ilya doesn't have many friends, thanks to her prickly Miss Perfect attitude, he decides to pity the silver tsundere wannabe. They head to the store, and Alia wonders why Masashika is being so nice to her, then gets mad when she thinks it's because he expects her to lose the presidency. She heads to the changing stalls angrily and intends to blow him away with her fashion sense. But before she starts stripping, she realizes otakis have active imaginations, so she tells him to move farther away so he doesn't hear the sounds. Relieved, she starts giving Patria and subscribers some content. Then she throws on a cute outfit to show him. Suddenly, she wonders what she'd do if he has no reaction at all. When she opens the curtain, Masashika tells her she looks great and even puts effort into the compliment, unlike you do when your girlfriend asks if she looks fat. Elia draws the curtain and proceeds to have a heart attack, while Masashika simultaneously experiences liver failure from the embarrassment. Elia wonders if he's used to giving compliments because of that bitch-faced Yuki, so she decides to try a boyish outfit like her again. Masashika makes her turn red when he tells her she looks cool. Elia tries on outfit after outfit after outfit just to milk compliments from Masashika, who's probably dying inside. This time, she decides to go with something risky and maybe tease Masashika with some skin. However, when she opens up to show him, she finds Yuki standing there in a blank stare from Masashika. Alaya switches to Russian and wishes she could disappear, so Masashika translates for Yuki, who calls her a big baby. Later on the train, Ilya wonders who would win between Madara and Satama, but snaps out of it when Masashika and Yuki start to say their goodbyes. When they leave, she starts freaking out about that skimpy skirt she wore when something more important hits her, and she wonders why they both got off at the same station. Afterward, Ilya heads home, where her sister Miria welcomes her. Miria can tell Ilya's looking kind of emo for a change, so she asks what's wrong. Ilya tells her about Masashika and his childhood friend, making Miria happy that a boy could finally break through that vibranium heart of hers. Ilya tries to play it off, but Miria asks her point blank if she likes Masashika. Ilya deflects and insists they're just friends, so Miria asks how that's possible since he's an indifferent slacker, which Ilya hates. Well, it all started 6 years ago in Russia when Ilya's class was split into groups for a class project where the winners would get a prize. Ilya was excited to do her part and went all the way into town to interview her subject study. But when she returned to school, she realized no one else seemed to give a shit. Ilya tried to motivate the group so they could win, but those future couch potatoes weren't having any of it. When they saw Alia had written an entire dissertation for the assignment, they had to tell her to chill cause she was doing too much. Eventually, a fight broke out and Alia was left all alone to finish that low-key master's degree. When the moment of truth came, another group won the prize and Alia was broken up about losing. On her way home, she blamed herself for expecting anyone to be as driven as she was. So she decided to start her woke feminist arc. Years later, she transferred into the prestigious Japanese school where she met the deadbeat loser sleeping beside her. They exchanged introductions, but from one period to the next, Alia could see Masashika was an tire slacker who probably got exhausted from breathing. However, she wasn't surprised since she'd seen this type of behavior before. When the school festival rolled around, the kids all had different tasks to do, so Alia shouldered hers alone. Some girls tried to get her to relax since it was just a school festival, but Alia was determined to put her all into it. She pricked herself over and over, but still insisted on finishing. Masashika suddenly busted knowing Alia would be working herself to death. He advised her to go home, assuring her that everyone would pitch in the next day, but she insisted on staying. That's when he showed her a permission slip for the Handicrafts Club to stay in school and assist them, which shocked Alia, who wondered how he arranged it. Masashika explained his methods and told her there was no point in doing it alone. But this ticked Alia off as she didn't understand what was so wrong with taking the festival seriously. She gave one of those eye-rolling speeches about not compromising on quiet equality and insisted there was nothing wrong with working so hard. Since no one else cared as much, Masashika reminded her that the whole point of festival attractions is to work together, so she should be using the emotional blackmail to guilt-trip the others into working hard with her instead. However, when he sees he's at risk of receiving another speech, he apologizes and appreciates all her efforts. Alia finally agrees to head home, but she wonders what Masashika's deal is. The next day, the boys really stepped up to the plate. To Alia's surprise, not only do they get their shit done, but everyone has fun doing it, including Alia. So when the school festival starts, it goes off without a hitch. Alia finds Masashika sitting alone at the after-party and decides to join him. He asks if she's not joining in on the dancing cause she has 2 left feet. Alia assures him her feet can do things he'd only ever seen on incognito mode. But she refused to dance with her many admirers. Masashika calls it a typical ice princess response, and it's apparently the first time she heard the nickname. Alia looks annoyed by the name and explains that the princess part makes her sound like she's some silver spoon nepo baby. She can't exactly help it, but she's never coasted by based on daddy's name alone, so she hates it when her efforts get ignored in favor of her birth. Masashika understands and agrees not to call her the name, which pleasantly surprises Alia. She thanks him for getting through her thick skull, so she could enjoy the festival with everyone else and apologizes for hitting him with that preachy speech about hope. Masashika tells her it's fine, but Alia insists on repaying him in a tangible way and asks what he wants. Masashika gives it some thought and asks her if she's got a real nickname. When she tells him it's Alia, he asks for permission to call her that. She asks what's in it for him, so he basically says have bragging rights for being chummy with a class idol and thanks her for the honor. Just then, the smell of desperation clogs the air as the Alia fan club shows up to ask her to dance. The boys start arguing over who should get the first dance and even invade her personal space to convince her. Alia gets overwhelmed by the raging simp body sprays, so Masashika grabs her hand and tells the boys she's already taken. Alia's heart almost shoots out of her southward cheeks as she stares at Masashika in surprise. Masashika challenges her to see how fast she can pick up the dance, and she gladly takes him up on his offer. From then on, Masashika returned to being the sloth prince, so Alia began showering him with venomous violations. But deep down, she'd officially been rizzed up in the present. Marriott praises their cute love story, while Alia insists that it's not like that since they're merely friends. However, Miria knows a friends to lovers trope when she sees one, since she has experience with her mystery locket lover. Alia admits that Masashika does pull through when it counts, while Miria starts gushing about her so gum making Alia want to barf. The next day, Masashika arrives at the student council to cover for Yuki. Maria gets excited to meet him and introduces herself as Ilia's big sister and council secretary. Masashika asks if she needs help with her shopping, but Miria tells him not to be so formal since he's friends with Alias. She grabs his hands and says it's a pleasure, but something about it seems strangely familiar to her. Miria asks what his first name is, and when he tells her, she realizes something, but after hesitating, she apologizes for freezing and says it's nice to meet Alias' friend. She then switches to Russian and tells him to get going, but Masashika asks what that meant. She repeats herself correctly in Japanese and greets the president goodbye. Later, they go shopping for office supplies when Miria loses focus on a cute plushie and suggests getting one for each council member. Masashika assures her Kenzaki will die a virgin if she does that, so they agree to Ken the idea, but she insists on getting one just for herself. After they walk back and Masashika pities Alia for having such a chaotic sister, they get to their next stop and he offers to hold the plushie, so Maria names it after Alia and tells him they look good together. They head into the tea shop where Maria gets busy with the store owner while Masashika stands aside, realizing that Yuki would be better at this since their mother taught her. He remembers how his father broke the news of their divorce when he was a kid, so Masashika chose to go with his dad, while Yuki chose to stay with her mom. Miria snaps him out of his "that's so Raven" moment and sees that he looks like he's in pain. She gives him a hug and pats his hair, which feels shockingly familiar and calming for him, till she burns him with a hot tea and ruins the moment. Later, Masashika and Miria return to the student council room and Kenzaki tells her not to leave her creepy demon plushie behind. They hand him the supplies they got, and when he takes a look, he thanks Masashika for stopping Miria from turning the office to Five Nights at Freddy's on that note. He asks Masashika if he'd be joining the student council, but Masashika insists that he'd rather watch paint dry, but he wouldn't mind helping out sometimes. Miria suggests he could just join on paper, making Masashika wonder why they're so hell-bent on getting him to join anyway. In return, Kenzaki asks why he'd rather drink sewer water than join, suspecting there's something more going on. Kenzaki reminds him how he was the GOAT when he was VP in middle school, but Masashika says he didn't have goals worthy of the position. Kenzaki tells him he's nothing special and reveals that he only became the president just to pull a baddie that was out of his league. This surprises Masashika, so Kenzaki pulls out a picture of a land whale and shows it to him. When Masashika wonders who it is, Kenzaki reveals it was him 2 years ago. Masashika says he looked like he ate his twin brother, and Kenzaki admits that he was a lazy bum on top of it. However, everything changed when he fell for a 10/10 that would never look at Jabba the Fat twice. That's when Masashika realizes the nerd managed to pull Chizaki with presidential reissue. Kenzaki points out that even Miria joined because Chizaki asked her to, so Miria pleads guilty as charged and explains that it doesn't matter why you join as long as you work in favor of the students. Kenzaki then tells him that he and Yuki made a great team in middle school and Masashika has nothing to be ashamed of. At this, Masashika remembers the good old days with his sister. Kenzaki spots this and assures him it would be fine if he joined just to make someone else president. Masashika promises to think about it, so Kenzaki and Miria move on to something else while Masashika wonders if he really wants to make someone president. When he asks where Alia is, Kenzaki says she's off settling a dispute between the baseball and soccer teams. Apparently, both teams have asked for permission for the school field to practice for upcoming events. The soccer team has qualified for regionals, while the baseball team has pro scouts coming to observe. Normally, Chizaki would be in charge of settling disputes, but this time she's away on officially convenient duties, so he sent Ilya, who seems to be having trouble with it. Hearing this, Masashika decides to see if the groups are fighting. Meanwhile, the baseball and soccer teams are right in the middle of a stare-off while Alia watches the guys argue over whose match is more important. But when Alia tries to chime in, the soccer team asks what her bright idea is. Alia suggests they use the Riverside Park to practice. So the soccer team tries to throw it to the baseball team, but they refuse to budge. However, both of the team captains remain suspiciously quiet along with the management team. As the boys continue to argue, Alia starts to realize she's shit at this. That promise she made to herself all those years ago was finally coming to bite her in her well-rounded peaches, since she's basically been a bitch to everyone. No one would ever want to listen to her. As she begins to cry, she switches to Russian to ask for help. Just then, Masashika pops in and announces that he's now in charge of Student Council General Affairs and is there to help. A few seconds ago, Masashika had walked up and heard the teams barking at each other while Mary struggled to calm them down. He knew Lily's approach was doomed to fail, but he figured it was good experience and was really going to pretend he didn't see nothing. However, he suddenly heard her asking for help in Russian, and it was a sound his simp ears just couldn't resist. Both teams recognize Masashika from his middle school tenure, so Masashika offers up a compromise. The baseball team would practice Riverside since they had fewer members, but in exchange, the soccer team would send over some members to help with the process. The boys begin to object and Alia tries to calm them, but Masashika simply looks for the management team. Suddenly, the head manager offers to have her team help out, so the baseball guys do a complete 180 and accept, hoping it hits something other than a home run. The boys finally settle the dispute and Masashika closes the matter, asking them to file official requests the next day, while Alia stares in surprise Pikachu. Afterward, they head back to the office and Masashika apologizes for butting in and making her look bad. Alia lets it slide but asks why he made that proposal, almost as if he knew the soccer manager would offer to volunteer. Masashika is surprised that Alia managed to notice, so she points out that he was staring at her the whole time. That's when Masashika explains that the manager is actually dating the baseball team's captain. Of course, Alia wouldn't notice since she was too busy monologuing. But the baseball captain hadn't said a word the entire time because he was trying to help his girlfriend, but also had to keep his priorities straight. Masashika knew the manager would jump the proposal and everyone would get a happy ending. The baseball team could lose focus on free diets, the soccer team could kick each other's balls, and the lovebirds could hit when no one was looking. Masashika spots Kenzaki, who asks them how it all went. Agya says Masashika worked his magic, so Kenzaki commends them, but Masashika calls him out on setting the whole thing up. Kenzaki admits to the allegations and asks if Masashika has finally made up his mind. Masashika commits to swallowing nails and stepping on Legos just to join the student council, so Kenzaki invites him to the office to get started. Later, Ilya and Masashika head home. While Masashika laments getting played by yet another anime glasses guy, Olya asks if he's joining the council just to run with Yuki for council president. So Masashika asks if she'd give up on being president if he was. However, Ilya insists that she'll never back down even if it means going up against him. Masashika figured she'd say that, so he offers to make her a student council president. Ilya looks surprised, but Masashika assures her that if that's what she wants, he'll stand with her and for her. So he stretches out his hand. Ilya wipes her tears away and takes his hand, and he announces they're officially a team. However, Ilya says something in Russian that reminds him of the Goldilocks from his memory. The familiar feeling makes him smile until he realizes Ilya's cutting off the circulation in his hand. Olya asks if he was thinking about another girl, making Masashika realize he's committed one of the sins of the sacred confession scene. She asks if he was thinking about Yuki after promising to be there for her. But even though Masashika denies it, Ilya's only way to move forward is to leave a palm print on his face. Afterward, she stretches her hand to help the idiot up. On the way home, Masashika brags that his steez has increased from the slap, but Ilya roasts him for having a barely functioning brain. When they arrive at Ilya's building, she asks if he's lost feeling in his cheek, but Masashika claims that he's fine. Just then, Ilya moves closer and kisses his cheek, shocking him. Ilya wonders why he's so surprised, but Masashika can't figure out if that was just cheek to cheek. Ilya leaves with zero answers, making Masashika wish she told him what she did in Russian. It turns out that Ilya had actually told Masashika she loved him in Russian earlier, and now she's having a full-on meltdown. Even if she loved him, which she refuses to admit, he'd probably just laugh in her face if she confessed. As Ilya continues to fight her pillar demon, she hears the door close. When she checks, she sees Maria sitting down looking like something's bothering her. However, when Ilya asks what it is, Maria pulls out the plushie and distracts her with it. As she walks away, she mentions meeting Masashika and understanding why Ilya would fall for Idris. Ilya once again denies the allegation, so Maria advises her to confess quickly before someone else steals him away from her. Meanwhile, Masashika starts cringing from the corny wreath he displayed that day. He wonders if Alaya's love confession is real, but thanks to some copium overdose, he convinces himself it couldn't be. Then he remembers his parents' frequent roast battles when he was a kid and concludes that love is as useless as Sakura in Team 7. When he returns home, he sees Yuki's shoes outside and figures she probably set him up to join the council. He reluctantly walks in only to find Yuki with her fruit garden on full display. Somehow, Masashika doesn't bat an eyelid and accuses her of doing it on purpose. Yuki admits it, and when Masashika asks why she would do it, she explains that they've never had the walking in on her cliché. Masashika didn't think it was possible to be this dumb, but apparently too much plot can give you brain rot. After borrowing some of Masashika's brain cells, she calls it an apology for tricking him into joining the council. However, Masashika calls her brave for thinking her package was enough. When Yuki insists that she saw him checking her out, Masashika reveals that guys prefer sneak peeks to bare cheeks. Yuki takes her L but insists he looked her up and down, so Masashika cracks and admits he checked out her top half. Later, Yuki dries her hair in his room and asks if Masha and Kenzaki managed to recruit him to the council. He confirms it, then breaks the news about running with Alaya for president. Yuki can't believe Alia cucked her like that and laments to God for punishing her with C-cups. While Alia is packing enough cups to end world hunger, Yuki insists that her package is small but mighty and offers to let him cop a feel. But when Masashi refuses, she says he already took her first squeeze back in elementary school. When he asks if she's serious, Yuki goes straight-face and narrates a game of tag from their childhood that turned into a game of grab. However, Masashika knows he wouldn't have forgotten if God gave him a miracle. Yuki finally lets up, so Masashika reminds her that she could barely play thanks to her asthma. So Yuki rejoices that she's well now and hands Masashika a brush to make it up to her. While he brushes, he apologizes for picking Ilya over her. So Yuki assures him a little sibling rivalry would be great for the plot. after Yuki tells him he's free to come back to her if Ilya's chest burden starts to suffocate him. But Masashika assures her there's no better way to die. Yuki leaves, but says she's glad that Masashika finally found someone to motivate him again, though that won't stop her from crushing him like a nut. The next morning, Masashika thinks it's strange that Yuki didn't do something heinous to wake him up, so he imagines that she's still pretty hurt from yesterday's news. He decides to make it up to her, but when he gets up, a hand grabs him and scares the chocolate cream right out of him. Yuki laughs at his sucker face till she suddenly notices she's stuck. Since there was no space for dump truck Kun, Masashika takes the opportunity to stuff her face as revenge, so Yuki laments getting stuffed in the face with her unborn nephews and nieces. Later in school, Oya waits nervously for Masashika to arrive. She tries to calm herself, thinking Masashika would probably sleepwalk in. As usual, however, Masashika struts in looking rather bright-eyed and sparkly. To her surprise, as he talks with the other classmates, Alia's love-struck filter makes him look like Dazai from Bungu Stray Dogs, which she thinks is kind of hot, but she tries to snap out of it. During class, she's surprised to see Masashika wide awake, so she remembers his promise to her, and thinks he might be stepping up his game. In gym class, Alia shows an impressive serve while Masashika gets smacked in the head. Later, Masashika nurses his head trauma when Alia shows up to check on him. Alia asks if he'll be heading to the nurse's office, but Masashika assures her it won't be the first time getting balls in the face. Alia decides to play nurse and see for herself, leaving Masashika to see an up-close confirmation of those E-cup allegations. Masashika struggles to control himself, but when Alia starts fiddling with her hair, she gives him a pit view that almost sends his Willy Wonka to make some white chocolate. But on the bright side, this proves his peaks of cheeks theory. Alia suggests they get some water, so they head over to the taps. But when Masashika looks over, he gets excited by how much pressure Alia's throat can take at once. Immediately, Masashika decides to wash away his dirty thoughts and keep his eyes away from the prize. Mary spots them and walks over, wondering why Masashika keeps looking up, but it turns out he's thanking God for gym uniforms. Miria notices how wet he is and uses her towel to dry him off, but in the process, Masashika gets a private screening, which must be God saying you're welcome. Masashika thanks her for the rub and says he knows what a dog feels like now, so Miria starts flirting hard, saying dogs do have the best style. Alia quickly breaks it up and suggests they head back, so Miria waves goodbye as they walk off. As they head back, Masashika prepares to get chewed out by Alia, but to his surprise, she's still concerned about his unfortunate run-in with the balls. Masashika realizes she hasn't caught on to his culture streak, so he assures her he's fine. He then remembers the kiss from last night and wonders if she's becoming lovey diva, so he asks why she's being so nice to him. Olia says he's been acting weird all day, so Masashika says he's actually been tweaking cause of his empty stomach. Ilya was red in the face as she realizes Masashika wasn't really paying attention in class. He was just too hungry to sleep. Masashika says he actually slept like a baby, but this only angers Alia, who stayed up overthinking. Alia finally snaps back to her usual tsundere self and looks like she's about to choke the life out of Masashika, but not in a good way. Masashika tries making some jokes to appease her, but Alia storms off, regretting ever worrying about the idiot who she's absolutely not in love with. After their last class, Masashika asks Alia to go to the council office together, but she looks at him like a talking trash heap and silently walks out. On the way, Masashika wonders if he crossed the line when they suddenly notice a group of well-trained simps leaving the office. When Masashika looks inside, he finds a Mikasa variant ready to chop off Aaron's head, so he tries to flee, but she pulls him back and apologizes for mistaking him for the baseball and soccer team. Apparently, Shizaki had taught the boys a lesson for ignoring Elia the other day, but she assures them she was gentle with her sword. When Masashika fears her to safety, Shizaki calls Kenzaki to her defense. So Kenzaki assures Masashika that his girlfriend won't get rough with other guys but him. Shizaki literally proves his point by smacking him to disagree, but Kenzaki doesn't mind getting slapped hard. Miria walks in and warns them not to get carried away, so Chiska apologizes to Kenzaki if she went too hard, and they both make googly eyes at each other. Olia and Masashika start to gossip about whether or not Shizaki has a torture chamber, but when Miri sees how chummy they're being, she teases them for being just as cute. Yuki walks in and apologizes for being late, so Kenzaki officially starts the meeting by asking Masashika to introduce himself. Masashika then states his position and announces that Elia and he will be running mates in the next election. He then explains that his entire personality is AniGogo's subscriber and takes his seat. Kenzaki commends him and tells him to work with Maria for the day so he can get the hang of things. Yuki interrupts and says she needs to discuss the budget with the arts club, and since Alia is the treasurer, she'll have to go too. Olia accepts and the girls head out together, but Masashika can feel a storm coming on the way. Ilya asks Yuki if they can talk, so they head into an empty classroom. There, she informs Yuki of her plan to run with Masatika, but Yuki says he already beat her to it. Alya is glad to clear that up, but Yuki starts poisoning the air with complaints of her losing Masatika. Ilya tries to ask what that's about, so Yuki declares that she loves Masatika even more than her parents. Ilya can't believe her ears when Yuki asks how she feels about Masatika. Alya says she is just a friend-zone inmate, so Yuki asks if she loves him too. She corners the poor girl to force it out of her, so Ilya insists that she won't let Yuki have him because he's hers. Yuki is pleased with her answer and says they should be heading to the art club now. They agree to use their code names in the upcoming battle, and Yuki walks ahead while Alya stays back to assess the damage to her brain that made her claim Masatika. Meanwhile, Masatika works with Maria and is surprised by how efficient she is. Unlike Shizaki, who's squeaking like she's holding in PK. Kanzaki gets rid of her and apologizes for the disturbance in the force. But Masatika suspects she's only good with torture tactics. Maria suggests taking a break and asks the boys if they want tea, since she's an expert. When Masatika sees the jam on the table, he asks if it's a Russian thing, and she says it is. He then asks if her black tea is only a winter staple, but Maria says they had it all the time cause her mother was a tea junkie. Maria asks how much he knows about Russia, so Masatika lies that he only has movie knowledge, even though he studied the language to raise his crush. As he takes a sip of the tea, he remembers his estranged mom is also a tea addict, but he gets distracted when Maria disapproves her jam. He decides to try it for himself, but it's an acquired taste. Just then, Yuki and Alya return with a weird air between them. Alya quickly sits close to Masatika, and when he complains about personal space, she says it's Russian bad luck for a girl to sit at the corner of the table. When he notices how hard Yuki's staring, he figures shit must have hit the fan when they went out. Maria confirms the Russian myth, but she explains that it's more for folks who want to get married and asks Alya that she's found her groom. Alya brushes it off and switches to Russian to say not yet, so Masatika feels relieved till he wonders what that means. Maria hands Alya a mountain of jam, making Masatika get excited to see her guzzle capacity. Later, Kenzeki calls it a day and dismisses the first years. On the way home, Masatika suggests they stop by a family diner to discuss the upcoming elections. Alya laments about it not being a date in Russian, so Masatika cringes at Russian. Stimping. At the diner, Alya orders for diabetes so she can feel better, so Masatika asks if anything happened with Yuki. Alya asks if he and Yuki are dating, but he says he'd rather get stomped by the colossal titan. When Alya wonders what's going on, he explains that Yuki just gets off on messing with people and suggests they move on to more important matters. He breaks the news that they have no chance of winning against Yuki at the moment. At the start of middle school, there were 6 pairs of aspirants, including he and Yuki, but half of them dropped out at the student congress, which was like a debate for the students to narrow the aspirants to 3 pairs before elections. Alya asks why half dropped out before then, so Asajika explains that it was basically like a preview of the elections that was bound to skew their favor to one side. Not all candidates have to be part of the student council, but it seems their numbers are low because they have given up on beating Yuki. Alya gets pressed about how at ease Masatika seems on their not date and ends up ruining her straw. She switches to type 2 diabetes and starts inhaling her future health insurance, making Masatika wonder if it's that good. Alya decides to tease him and asks if he wants a taste. He tries to refuse, but she scoops some up and insists that she try it. Masatika offers to get a fresh spoon, but Ilya insists that it's a normal thing in Russia. Masatika can tell she's capping, but he can't resist a woman offering him her cream. He takes a mouthful with his tongue while the rest of the diner witnesses the taboo. Suddenly, Masatika notices Tanyama outside, but Ilya interrupts him and asks how they can be Yuki. Masatika suggests taking a different angle to appeal to the students and gives the example of Kenzaki. Even though his rival was the former middle school president and Kenzaki wasn't on the council, Kenzaki still won. His success started as a joke from the newspaper club who thought his lard ass couldn't win. However, everyone was surprised to see the evolution of mammals from land whale to human, and it won them over. Alya asks if she needs a compelling backstory to show the people how hardworking she is, but Masatika is too focused on the taboo spoon's future. Alya can't take what she dished out, so Masatika decides to order a meal and a fresh spoon to save themselves the awkwardness. Alya teases him for getting flustered over something minor, so Masatika asks if everyone in Russia just goes around swapping DNA. Alya switches to Russian and says he's the only one she'd do it with, making Masatika nervous. They return to the topic of winning the election, so Masatika says their first chance to garner support will be at the end of the first term, when the council gives its policy speech. Ilya asks what she should say in hers, so Masatika advises her to speak from her heart after it is thought out. He then says she's perfectly charming as it is, so Alia blushes and wishes she praise him more. After Alia asks how his food tastes, Sophie offers her some till he remembers she can't handle chili. Alia refuses to back down because she's dense and agrees. Masachika scoots her impending diarrhea and his inner demon wins out. As he hands Olia a whole chili to try, Olia says her prayers and swallows it, then bends over to mourn her fallen taste buds. Later, the pair walks home and Alia asks what Yuki plans to do now that she's lost her running mate. Masachika says she's insanely popular and she's likely to pick someone from their old student council, but it would be trouble if she teamed up with Tanyama. She was Yuki's opponent back in middle school, but her campaign ended in bitter tears. However, Masachika says that he'll find out soon enough. The next day, Yuki introduces someone to the council and Masachika almost chokes as Ayano walks in as a new member of the student council, joining general affairs with Masachika. After exiting the room, Masachika hears a faint sound calling him master. Just when he is about to take out some holy water from his pocket, Masachika notices Ayano standing behind him. The girl tells him to please follow her and Masachika decides to comply. As the two enter a less crowded space, Ayano asks Masachika if the news of him running for presidency with Elia is true. When Masachika confirms, Ayano reveals that the head of the family, aka his grandfather, is very upset about this as he doesn't want him to get Nuki's path to greatness. Hearing this, Masachika grits his teeth in anger as he recalls how the old boomer told him he is no longer a soul when he left the house and how it was his bright idea to keep his relationship with Yuki a secret. Sighing at his daddy issues, Masachika asks Ayano if she is here to sniff out his true intentions on someone else's command. But Ayano discloses to him, revealing that since she is Yuki's retainer, it's her job to find out what the other party wants. Realizing Ayano is as thick in the head as the jizz rag under his bed, Masachika assures her that he didn't intend to go up against Yuki, but he had to do something to further the plot of the Alia. But since Ayano is a basic Becky, she fails to comprehend this and asks Masachika if he is purposely hurting Yuki to protect Olia's dream because his heart goes doki doki for the Russian. Masachika curtly tells Ayano that he is solely helping Olia because that's what he wants to do. With that, he also orders the doormat to relay this information to his so-called grandfather. Thankfully, Ayano gets the memo, but before leaving, she asks Masachika what he feels for Yuki. In response, Masachika tells her that Yuki means the world to him and that hasn't changed. Later on, Masachika chills with his bros when Takeshi and Nakaru excitedly show him a magazine featuring women with badonkers badonkins and ask him to pick one for freaky time. At first, Masachika tries to tell his friends he is not into fatherless girls, but since he doesn't want the boys to think he has erectile dysfunction, he ends up picking a brown-haired girl. This leads to the boys telling him how the girl he has selected looks awfully like Maria. When they further ask Masachika if Maria is someone he would think about when he is Jack and the Beanstalk, Masachika reminds them how Maria has a boyfriend. All of a sudden, Masachika feels as if someone is throwing daggers at him. When he turns around, Masachika finds Olia looking at him. Masachika quickly tells her that the magazine belongs to Takeshi. As Delia takes her seat, the boys continue to hound Masachika about his type in women. In the end, Masachika admits that he wants to date a woman who he can be friends with. Hearing this, Olia whispers in Russian how she would be the perfect fit, which makes Masachika blush. However, he suddenly remembers the girl from his childhood, prompting him to reveal how he wants a girl that has a bright smile. His friends nod in understanding as they add how it's important for a girl to be approachable. Of course, since Alia is as cold as the toilet seat in winters, she becomes irritated by Masachika's preference and throws a huge fuss. After berating Masachika for having a type, Alia confiscates Takeshi's Jizz magazine. In the meantime, Yuki asks Ayano if she is satisfied with her interrogation. Ayano answers back, revealing how her faith in Masachika has been restored and further informs Yuki everything that Masachika said during their conversation. When Yuki asks Ayano how serious was her brother, Ayano reveals that Masachika was so serious that her uterus began to tremble. Weirded out, Yuki asks her if she is also into Masachika, but Ayano clarifies that she just wants Masachika to send her a 3-hour-long audio of him whimpering. Hearing this, Yuki tells Ayano that she's a freak and she likes it. Before leaving, Ano tells Yuki how Masachika said she is very dear to him. Yuki loses her mind upon hearing this and admits to Ayano that she was about to go ham on Masachika, but luckily, this is a child-friendly show. To further appease Yuki, Ayano reveals how everyone thinks Yuki will win the election as everyone thinks Alia is doing something reckless by challenging her. Hearing this, Yuki rejoices as she tells Ayano how she has waited for a showdown between her and Masachika, who is also a smart just like her, and now she finally has the chance to show everyone who is the better sibling. Yuki then turns to Ayano and asks her if she looks scarier than a baddie without makeup at this moment. Later that day, the student council gather together in the room while Yuki, Maria, and Ayano play bluff. Masachika, Kenzaki, and Chizaki observe them from afar. The boys discuss how Alia looks cold but actually wears her heart on a sleeve, while her older sister Maria is harder to read. Chizaki further adds how Maria even looks like she has a few screws loose, prompting Masachika to side with her. Their conversation is then suddenly interrupted by Ayano observing her diligence. Kenzaki asks if she learned to be this obedient due to her duty as a retainer, to which Ayano reveals that she learned everything from her grandparents, prompting Masachika to disclose how Ayano's grandparents used to work for Yuki's family. When Shizaki and Kenzaki inquire about her parents, Ayano informs them that her parents are office workers and she became a retainer because she has a humiliation kink, and of course because she admires her grandparents. During the conversation, Ayano admits to the group how she trained all of her childhood to become the best doormat anyone has seen. Suddenly, Maria joins them, revealing how Elia scolded her for being annoying. While Kenzaki and Chizaki worry about Elia's well-being, Masachika and Maria assure them that Elia is actually enjoying the game with Yuki, which is apparently very rare. Wanting to stock up on some refreshments, Maria asks Masachika to come with her to the convenience store. After collecting everyone's orders, the two walk towards the store. When Maria thanks him for joining Elia in her quest to become the president, Masachika shrugs it off, but Maria states how it's a big deal since Elia is very competitive with his support. Elia now has someone to rely on. Hearing all this, Masachika asks Maria if she purposely hides her competitive side from Elia. Maria admits that her sister is a very serious child who tries her best in everything, and because of that, she doesn't want to become another battle that Elia has to conquer. As they approach the vending machine, Maria tells Masachika that she is going an extra mile for Alia because siblings have a very complicated relationship. This prompts Masachika to think about his own sister, and he wonders if Yuki is purposely playing dumb for him. However, he quickly shrugs the thought off, realizing Yuki is actually stupid. Maria then turns to Masachika, accusing him of doing the same, but Masachika reveals that he just acts like a Dutch bag because he just wants to live an easier life. As a result, Maria pets his head and commends Masachika for doing the bare minimum. The next day, Elia is approached by Tanayama, who sternly asks her if she got under Masachika to make him partner up with her. Bamboozled by the accusation, Elia becomes non-verbal until Masachika joins them. After seeing the commotion as he asks her to apologize for her indecent words, Tanayama instead calls for a general meeting, determined to kick Masachika out from the student council committee. The next day, Kenzaki informs them that Tanayama wants to hold a debate on whether teacher screening should be used for student council entry. So Masachika and Ilya agree to beat her at her own game and solidify their candidacy against Yuki. Later, the pair works on Ilya's points to counter the opposition, when Ilya asks if he's on bad terms with Tanayama, when Masachika says they were on fine terms before. Ilya wonders why she's now out to drag him on the streets of Twitter. Masachika suggests that Tanayama might think he's only doing this to shag a white-haired baddie, so Ilya feels bad that he can't tell what cheap hair dye looks like. Later, Ilya and Masachika get ready for the debate when Miyami shows up. She tells Ilya that she's Tanayama's running mate and wishes her luck, so Ilya is surprised that she's not as venomous as Tanayama. Masachika says Miyamite is one of the most popular girls in school, but advises Ilya to stay focused on Tanayama instead. As the students wait for the debate to start, they wonder what Ilya plans on bringing to the table. Meanwhile, Alia has flashbacks of the time she was ignored like a try-hard Tinder profile and wonders if the crowd is going to swipe left on her too. Even though Ilya tries to toughen up for Masachika's sake, the whispers and laughter leave her paralyzed until Masachika appears. He suddenly asks if she's really an E-cup, making Ilya switch focus to hiding the evidence of her stuffed bra. But when Masachika sees that she's calmed down, he asks who her enemy is. Ilya thinks it's Tanayama, but Masachika tells her it's actually her OCD and advises her to just do whatever she thinks is cool, and he'll handle the rest. With that, Kenzaki announces the beginning of the debate and calls Tanayama up to stake her case. Tanayama confidently walks up and informs the students that the student council randomly chooses any couch potato and glue sniffer to join the team. She then asks the students if they really want some nose-picking weirdo leading them, and the students begin to see her point. Masachika starts to sweat when he realizes that Tanayama is stooping to the depths of cancel culture. Tanayama closes her argument by asking for their support in creating a student council they can all respect, so the students applaud her as she leaves. Next, Kenzaki calls up Ilya, but the students feel she might as well pack up and go home after that Optimus Prime-level speech. Ilya walks up remembering Masachika's advice to do things her way, so she starts by introducing herself since some of the peasants have never heard her speak. Elia's argument is that involving the teachers in the decision-making would only infringe on the council's authority, which would strip the president and the VP of some of their power. She reminds the cannon fodder that the academy prides itself on student autonomy, so if they involved the teachers, it would be the same as crying mommy for a boo-boo. The students start to consider that maybe glue sniffers aren't so bad if the president deems them sane. Misachika is proud of Elia's final food to Taniyama. While Kenzaki announces the start of the debate, Taniyama quickly goes on the assault and points out that the council has accepted every volunteer recently, and when Elia asks what wrongs with that, Taniyama says she's worried about a downturn in performance. Elia starts putting Taniyama in her place, making her flustered, but when Mayumi sees this, she quickly summons her Twitter warriors. Suddenly, one of the NPCs points out that Elia is an outsider, making everyone wonder what she can possibly know about their school's nuances. Misachika realizes the girls are playing dirty, while Alaya gets flustered by all the gossip flying around. Her vision starts to blur, but before she collapses, Misachika shows up and tells her to leave the rest to him. He then takes over and makes a light joke about Elia needing some milk. This puts the crowd at ease as he confidently continues. He asks the students why they're even having the debate when they already chose Kenzaki, a former land whale and part-time couch potato. If it were left to the teachers, they would never have let him out of the ocean. The students laugh as Kenzaki takes on the straight bullets. Then Misachika reminds them that Kenzaki was only able to become president because their system allows for anyone with the drive to become a council officer. His argument completely shatters the opposition, and by the time Kenzaki asks if Taniyama has anything to say, she runs away. More surprising, Alea runs after her, and since Miam recognizes that she's just there to look pretty, she gives up immediately. She apologizes for the weird exit, and Kenzaki officially declares the debate over. Meanwhile, Taniyama starts to spiral as she laments how much faith she had in Yuki and Misachika's teamwork, which was the copium she needed to step down. However, when she saw Elia and Misachika together, the reality of her worthlessness caught up with her. Suddenly, Elia grabbed Taniyama and was surprised to see her eyes sweating already. Taniyama then reveals that she was only fine with being a loser in the face of true love, but now Elia has ruined it. Elia asks if she has any other insults or curses she wants to hurl out, but Taniyama admits she has no right to blame her for a fanfic she created in her head. At that moment, Mayumi runs up and tells Elia she'll take care of the crybaby herself. So Elia starts to leave when she pauses and tells Taniyama that she doesn't know why Misachika chose her either, but she promises to do her best to show Taniyama he made the right choice. Mayumi points out that Elia isn't so cold-hearted after all, and Taniyama agrees that it must be why Misachika chose her. Meanwhile, Yuki does her evil villain analysis and calls Misachika such a softie, saying you won't be able to win without killer instincts. When Ayano shows her dormant format tendencies again, Yuki scolds her for not knowing how to play the evil villain and ooze boss aura. Ayano apologizes for her vanilla personality and makes up for it by turning into a standing fan. However, she undoes her good deed when she reminds Yuki that giving off boss vibes a trait of characters who lose. Later, Alia tells Misachika about Tanamiya putting him and Yuki on a pedestal, so she promises to give the elections her all for his sake and hers. Alia then asks why Misachika chose her instead of Yuki. He explains that he mainly ran with Yuki out of guilt. Though Elia doesn't get it, Misachika remembers how he left her to go with his dad. Then he felt bad because while other students were running for their own noble reasons, Misachika was only doing it out of guilt. Everyone thought he was some shadowy mastermind, but Misachika was actually avoiding the spotlight. However, he tells Elia that this time he's running for vice president because he wants to be her running mate. When Misachika sees Elia's reaction, he gets embarrassed and says it wasn't between her and Yuki or anything. Elia teases him, so Misachika asks why she's also running with him, making Elia say something in Russian. When he asks what she said, she says they should get going. Misachika agrees, but before they leave, Elia asks why the heck he brought up her cup size earlier. So Misachika says he wanted to confront Firm if they were larger than his fists. So Elia scoffs and says just barely. Later that night, Yuki has dinner with the Grinch who stole Christmas, and he asks about the debate with Taniyama. When Yuki confirms it was a shit show, her grandfather says that she's not allowed to lose against anyone, especially Misachika. He nags about how Misachika is almost as smart as Reed Richards, but since he threw his responsibilities away, Yuki has to take him down. After dinner, Yuki's mom asks if she and Misachika are still close, so Yuki assures her that she sometimes wakes up on top of him, but her mother tells her to say no more so the FBI can't question her. When Yuki goes to her room, she asks Ayano for a way to feel better, so she buries her face between Ayano's chesticles. This does the trick, and Yuki thanks her for her service. The next day, some boys go up to Misachika to congratulate him on dominating the debate. When Masatika sees Alia burying her nose in her work again, he decides to get her involved. The boys are afraid to get emotionally abused, so Masachika kicks his plan to start up a conversation. Thanks to him, the boys are able to warm up to Alia and discuss the debate. However, when the boys start mocking Tanayama for chickening out on her own idea, Alia grows a heart and asks Masachika to step out with her. They head to the council room and Masachika asks if she's bothered about Tanayama's rose segment. Alia confirms it, so Masachika reminds her that they won fair and square, but Alia insists that it was technically only a forfeit, even though he informs her that helping Tanayama save face would waste their Congress win. Alia still feels bad about her. Because of this, Masachika agrees to help Alia help Tanayama, which surprises her. Alia apologizes for using him as a lapdog, but Masachika says he'll gladly lick whatever she wants him to. Suddenly, he notices something trembling and realizes Kenzaki and Shizaki must have been baby-making. In secret, he pretends not to notice until he realizes Alia's making those googly eyes, screaming for some applauding. Because of this, Masachika has no choice but to rat at the president, which snaps Alia out of it. Kenzaki and Shizaki crawl out, claiming to have dropped something on the floor for the last 30 minutes, so they all agree to pretend nothing happened that day. When Masachika and Alia step out, Aldia gets embarrassed and runs off. Afterward, Masachika tries to walk up to Miami, but he gets repelled by the brain-dead conversation of the NPCs. Miami is tired of getting asked about the draw with Blake Lively, so she calls Masachika's attention and asks what he wants. They head to an empty classroom and Miami tells him she's down if he wants to plow her land. But Masachika refuses and advises her to only date people she likes. Miami blankly explains that it doesn't matter since she takes it from the back. So Masachika fights the urge to pull out a $2 bill and tells her to stop selling herself short. Miami then reveals that Tanayama had said the exact same thing. After slapping the shit out of her, they finally get down to clean business and Masachika asks if Miami can help get people to stop talking smack about Tanayama. Miami figures Alia must have put him up to it, but she wonders why he's asking an enemy for help, especially since she tried to read the debate. Masachika wonders why the embodiment of Barbie is so attached to the second coming of Oppenheimer, so Miami tells him he of all people should know how it feels to be drawn with someone with so much passion. They agree to work together, so Masachika suggests writing a rumor to explain why Tanayama left that day. Miami warns him that it'll bring their victory into question, but Masachika assures her they're ready for the consequences. Miami agrees to the plan and goes off to spread a rumor, but Masachika stays back and senses a disturbance in the force. He calls for Ayano and the girl comes springing up like an unwhacked mole. Yuki also reveals herself, explaining that since they saw him conniving with the enemy, they decided to eavesdrop on their conversation. Masachika doesn't buy it and asks for the real reason, so Yuki confesses that she just happened to be there by chance. Suddenly, Alia comes looking for Masachika, but when she sees him with Yuki and Ayano, she gets annoyed and tells them to enjoy the three-way. Masachika hears her lamenting in Russian about being left out of the train, while Yuki makes it worse by teasing him. Meanwhile, Miame remembers the day she was getting down with a boy toy when Tanayama walked in, horrified. Miami had tried to defend her $2 host status, but Tanayama smacked her up her cheeks and told her not to sell herself short. Now Miami is glad to repay the favor. She returns to the cannon fodder, and when they ask what that was about, she says Masachika wanted to know why Tanayama wasn't in school. When the girl suggests that she might be reeling from the shame, Miyamai says that it was actually her fault and Tanayama only left the debate because she was mad at her for having plants in the audience. Meanwhile, Masachika tries to convince Alia that it wasn't what she looked like, but Alia wasn't having any of it, so he asked her to study with him. Later, they have their study date at the council room and Masachika hopes no one sees how close they're sitting when Yuki barges in. At the worst possible time, she asks if they can join them and Alia agrees to it. But in Russian, she laments about wanting to be alone with Masachika, which makes him fight the urge to pee. Moments later, they're all studying when Ilya notices Masachika is only reading the solutions, but she tries to query him for it. Yuki says he's always studied like that, and Ayano confirms this. Ayano starts struggling with her work, so Masachika asks if she needs help. Ayano reluctantly accepts, but tells him to shame her for being a useless waste of neurons. Ilya comments on the three of them seeming closer than ordinary childhood friends. Masachika asks why she thinks so, but before Ilya can point out the deep-rooted degeneracy, Maria walks in. Later, they enjoy some of Maria's special tea when she stumbles on a hypnosis book that was confiscated earlier. Maria tells Ilya to try it out on her, but when Ilya refuses, she asks Masachika to do it instead, giving Yuki an idea. They all gather around as Masachika starts to follow the instructions, To everyone's surprise, Maria actually falls asleep when Masachika claps his hands. After he undoes the hypnosis, Maria wakes up and asks when he's going to try the hypnosis. Alia refuses to believe Maria doesn't remember what just happened, so Yuki suggests she try it out to see if Maria is pretending. Masachika performs the steps again and Alia falls asleep, and for some reason, Maria does too. Yuki then points out what a golden opportunity it is for some diabolical acts, so Ayano suggests they ask them what their deepest, darkest secrets. Yuki likes the idea, so she gives the girls the instruction to become unrestrained and lay their minds and their bodies bare. When the girls open their eyes, they head straight for Masachika and end up in a three-way rubbing situation, which isn't the kind Yuki was hoping to watch. Suddenly, Alea gets up and starts to strip away the burden of her school uniform, making Masachika's oil start to leak. When Maria joins the strip party, Yuki figures that her instruction may have gone too far. They try to wake the girls up, but nothing seems to work. When Chizaki suddenly enters the room, Yuki explains the situation, so Chizaki does some finger magic and makes the girls pass out again. When they wake up, they're finally back to their senses and are embarrassed that they almost let the girls hang free, while Chizaki heads to Masachika to slap the memory out of his head. A while later, Masachika struggles to focus on his studies, because AniGogo is about to upload another video. He realizes he's become pretty lazy, unlike how he was as a kid. However, he's determined to not disgrace Alia. Speaking of the devil, Alia calls, and when Masachika asks what she wants, she says she remembers his tendency to slack off when he's alone and asks if he's getting his work done. Masachika confesses to reading a single line 10 times over and wonders how Alia keeps her focus. So Alia then suggests they make a bet to keep him motivated. He tells her his goal is to place in the top 30 of their year, so Alia suggests that if he can do that, she'll do anything he wants. When he asks what happens if he can't, she says he'll have to do anything she wants. Masachika doesn't mind the idea, but he promises he's not a close-headed, pain-loving junkie. Alia then says give a name in Russian and says it's a hint, but when Masachika pretends to not understand it, she chuckles. They agree to the bet, and when Alia remains calm, he laments that she's gotten used to her big bro. Alia reminds him they're the same age, but he says her birthday is in November while his was in April. He then thanks her for the motivation and ends the call, wondering if she's some witch who can read his mind. Meanwhile, Alia confesses that she only called cause she watched a scary movie, but now she's furious that he celebrated her birthday without her, and wonders if they're really friends. 5 days later, they wrap up their school exams, so Masachika asks Alia to walk home together so they can plan for the closing ceremony. While they walk, Masachika confirms that something's up since she hasn't flirted in Russian since that last call. Masachika asks why she's been acting strange, and Alia is surprised he picked up on that. When he says he could just tell, she sarcastically asks if he cares enough to pay her attention during exams. Masachika reminds her she's his partner, so she asks why she didn't invite her to his birthday party. Masachika says he didn't have one, but when Alia refuses to believe him, he assumes it must be a Russian thing to celebrate birthdays. Alia asks if they don't celebrate in Japan, and he says he hasn't since elementary school. The teasing begins when he realizes why she was mad, but Alia insists that not inviting someone to your birthday is the Russian equivalent of a middle finger. Because of that, Masachika suggests they celebrate the birthday together and officially invites her to come. That weekend, Alia shows up looking like a Russian goddess. As they head out, they discuss Kenzaki's idea of introducing summer uniforms so they don't die of heat stroke. Just then, Masachika realizes that everyone is staring at her like she's the female reincarnation of Ghost Satoru. But when he tells her about it, she says it's the price of white hair and animes. As expected, she was used to getting hit on like a busted-up Tev, but she deals with it by rambling things in Russian till they go away. Masachika says he's glad. He's glad she's not letting sweaty randos pick her up. So Alia calls him out on sounding like a jealous boyfriend, but Masachika doubles down and says he tends to act like a boyfriend on dates. Alia switches to Russian to say it's her first ever date. They finally arrive at a restaurant and Masachika feels like he's nailed the perfect spot. Till Alia reveals that she goes there all the time with her family. Bursting his bubble when they sit inside, Masachika gives Alia a rundown on the closing ceremony. First, the presidential candidates lay out their motivations. Then their running mates explain why they're backing them. However, the most important part is the audience's reaction. The students tend to only applaud for the pair they want to win, which means some pairs will be met with excruciating silence. Masachika says they're unlikely to get a reaction like Yuki will, so they don't need to try and beat her. Alia is surprised at his passive approach, but he says he's just being realistic. The first pair tends to get a muted response since the crowd is weighing their options, so they could use that as an excuse if Yuki shows them up. Alia looks visibly annoyed, but Masachika assures her that their only option unless she wants to play mind games with Yuki. Alia says she doesn't, but before she continues, the waiter brings out their order and Masatika offers a toast to his birthday. After they dig in, Ilya asks if he's the one that started the rumor about Miami, but he says that was all her. It worked in getting people to stop shitting on Taniyama, but it also put the outcome of the debate in limbo. Ilya thanks him for doing it anyway, and this catches Masatika off guard, so Ilya teases him for being cute when he blushes. Masatika can't believe she's not even hiding behind Russian this time, so when she offers him a bite from her fork, he decides to beat her at her own game, thinking she backed down. Surprisingly, Ilya used the same fork without hesitating, and Masatika finally surrendered. Once they're done eating, Ilya pulls out a gift for him, so he opens it and finds a fancy mug. When he comments that such things are stuffed couples buy in pairs, Alia cheekily says she bought one for herself and already started using it. But before Masashika has a heart attack, she tells him she's kidding and chuckles. Later, at the student council office, Kenzaki brings up the summer uniforms, so Maria offers to make tea for the meeting. Masachika asks what the update on the uniforms is, so he says they should introduce them this summer break and make a surprise announcement. At the closing ceremony, Yuki thanks him for saving her from heat rash, but Kenzaki says it was all thanks to Chizaki. Chizaki tries to stay humble and praise him too, and the two quickly disappear into their own googly-eyed world. When Maria starts serving tea, Masuchika realizes she's still acting weird from the hypnosis incident, so when she's ready to clean up, she offers to help while they wash up. Masachika apologizes for the incident, but Maria says she started it and asks what exactly she did while she was out. Masatika tells her that she grabbed him and Ilya and gave them head pats, and Maria is surprised that her Russian side never took over. However, she asked him if he got a look at her milk jugs, and Masachika confesses that they were pretty hard to miss. Maria gets mad, but Masachika is relieved that she's not as scary as Alias. The worst she can do is tug on his face and give him a stern warning. Suddenly, her phone rings, and when she sees it's her mom, Masachika offers to take care of the rest. When everyone else is gone, Yuki points out that they're alone, so Masachika tries to leave to find his grandpa. Yuki laments on not having any sibling time in a while since he's busy simping for Alia. She then hops on the table and asks him to spoil her a bit. So Masatika gets on top and starts speaking a secret Alabama code, causing her to foam at the mouth. Afterward, Masachika heads out to meet his grandpa, but he asks what's up with the narcissistic white suit. Grandpa realizes it's missing something and adds sunglasses to show he's not playing. While they wait for the parent-teacher meeting, Alia walks out with her mom, and Masachika remembers that his grandma is obsessed with Russia, so he tries to keep him away. When he notices Alia's mom, he greets her, and she reveals that Alia has gushed about him several times. Masachika blushes, but suddenly notices his grandpa has escaped and is already asking Alia to marry Masatika. He eventually gets the geezer to settle down and wait for their meeting. When they're done, they walk down the hallway and run into Masatika's mom, which triggers his trauma. Days later, Masachika remembers how he tried hard to impress his mom with his achievements. However, as time went on, his mom looked at him like he was an annoying parking ticket. Masachika figured he'd work extra hard at the piano to impress her, but she ended up telling him to stop soiling the air with the sound of desperation. Just then, Masachika woke up from his bad memories and discovered he had developed a cold. Later that day, Ilya appeared at his house with some medicine from Yuki. Masachika tries to get rid of her, but Ilya claims Yuki insists she nurse him to health. Before Masachika could put a hex on his sister, Ilya's Russian half revealed that she was lying. When they went inside, Ilya looked around and couldn't hide her disgust. When Masachika asked what was wrong, she gave a random excuse, but in reality, she didn't know a whole room could smell like stale jizz. She then offered to make lunch for him and suggested a delicacy that would help with the cold. But when she mentioned it would take her 4 hours, he said he would settle for regular porridge. Ilya headed to the kitchen to get started when she noticed the mug she got him and felt happy he was using it. She then regained her focus and moments later returned to the room to give Masachika the food. Masachika was more grateful for the maid cosplay, so Ilya played her part and served him as he dug in. He praised her cooking skill, and she got hotter than Masachika's temperature. Then she asked for his parents, and he revealed that he only had a single father, and he seemed to work wherever they were selling milk. After Masachika was done, Ilya confirmed he had taken the medicine, so she said she'd study in the living room while he slept. Later, when Masachika woke up, he couldn't believe he overslept and figured Ilya would have left by now. To his surprise, some maid contest was taking place with Ayano putting up an impressive fight. She quickly rushed to support him, but Masachika pointed out that he could get cancelled for being that close to her melons without consent. Consent? Ilya tried to sound unbothered as she warned Ayano to consider social distancing, but Ayano insisted it was part of her services. When Ilya pointed out that she was Yuki's maid, not his, Ayano claimed that she was sent there at Yuki's request. Since Alia couldn't compete with the services Ayano was willing to offer, she decided to head home instead. She hoped Ayano would take care of him and left. After Ayano served up some of that delicacy Alia made for him, and when Misachika had some, he couldn't believe his taste buds. Next, Ayano offered him his medicine, and before he knew it, he was sleepy again. Ayano offered to give him a bath first, but Misachika declined. She seemed to have more suggestions involving taking off his clothes, but he said he'd rather take hers off in his dreams. When he got in bed, Ayano continued to make herself a nuisance, so Misachika ordered her to head back to Yuki and call it a night. Thankfully, that did the trick, and he was finally free. The next morning, Misachika woke up and found that he had overslept again. He'd asked Ayano why she skipped school for him, so she claimed his health was more important and hurried to prepare lunch. Misachika's appetite seemed to return, but Ayano advised him to take it easy and offer him his medicine again. Suddenly, Misachika got a strange feeling and asked to see the package of the medicine. It turned out that medicine was putting him to sleep, so he asked why Ayano hadn't warned him, but she simply apologized and suggested he discipline her roughly. Misachika figured it was Yuki that put her up to this and decided to go to school. Moments later, Misachika rushed to school and overheard the students praising Yuki as the queen. He realizes he's messed up big time and heads for the classroom. There he finds Alia sitting in a classroom alone, and when he asks what happened, she apologizes for wasting all this help. It all started the previous morning when Yuki had informed her of Misachika's cold. Since Yuki claimed she was busy, Alia offered to help and Yuki handed her his medicine and a dress. Afterward, she asked Alia if she wouldn't mind making a guest appearance on a PA broadcast the next day, hoping to talk about the recent student congress. Alia said she wouldn't discuss the matter of the debate again, so Yuki said it was no problem and begged her to come on the broadcast anyway. Desperate to keep her melons from flattening some more, Alia agreed and Yuki stepped back. Yuki then commented on their unwillingness to take advantage of the debate and called Alia awfully laid back, mocking her for not trying to win. That's when Alia noticed Yuki's creepy smile that indicated her future as a PDF. Yuki told Alia she was basically a sitting duck, so Alia figured there was more to the broadcast. Yuki revealed that she intended to take advantage of Misachika's sickness, but Alia warned her not to belittle her just because she's alone. Yuki said she was free to run to Misachika for help, but Alia insisted that she could beat her on her own. Alia assured Misachika that she did all she could to prepare, but she was still surprised when Yuki apologized just before the broadcast. She claimed she was sorry for being rude to a dear friend and said she was only trying to force herself to go all in. Alia, being softer than melted butter, accepted her apology and said it only showed how serious Yuki was. But the pity party didn't end there. Yuki went ahead to tell her the reason why she had to become president no matter what. She revealed that she used to have an older brother who was more talented than her. Her parents expected great things of him, till one day he was just gone. She then claims it's her duty to finish what he started, which threw Alia way off. The broadcast was about to begin, so Yuki asked why Alia wanted to be president too. Alia immediately froze, and by the time the broadcast began, she was better off handing the mic to a doorpost. That was how the rest of the broadcast continued, so Misachika figured out what game Yuki had played. Meanwhile, Alia was beating herself up till Misachika snapped her out of it and warned her she was only playing right into Yuki's hands. When Misachika had explained what Yuki was trying to do, Alia realized she was laying the groundwork for the closing ceremony by throwing her off her game. Alia finally regained her composure, but lost it when she saw Misachika smiling like a closeted glue sniffer. Misachika admitted that he was finally getting excited, and for some reason, Alia was digging the Hisoka energy. Once that was settled, Alia lamented not having a good reason to run for president, unlike Yuki, who was doing it for her family. However, Misachika told her to chin up and insisted that he knew how hard she had worked for this. Alia mocked him for sounding like a simp in a love confession, so Misachika blamed all those recaps with too much risk for affecting him. Alia then agreed to fight regardless of Yuki's dead brother. When Misachika heard this, he decided he had to clear things up, but was interrupted when Taniyama and Mien walked in. Misachika asked what they wanted, so Taniyama apologized for her appalling behavior previously, and Miyama joined in the apology. Alia accepted it, so Taniyama asked why she didn't bring up her loss during the broadcast. Alia said she couldn't brag about her victories since she technically didn't beat her, but Taniyama called her prideful. Thankfully, she had no pride, and she was determined to set the record straight. Misachika figured she was planning to declare her defeat at the ceremony and told her she couldn't just run wild. Instead, he had a better suggestion. After discussing, Taniyama and Miyame agreed to help, so Misachika said they had a chance to beat Yuki. Alia asked if they were no longer going for a draw, but Misachika insisted that since they fired the first shot, they were going to destroy them. Later, Ilya practices her speech in front of Masachika, who thinks she did great. Ilya doesn't sound convinced, and when Masachika reminds her she's done this before, Ilya says the audience will be larger this time. Masachika tells her to focus on delivering her message, but Ilya insists that she needs to connect with the audience the way he does. Masachika claims it mostly comes down to experience, but when Ilya doesn't buy it, he tells her a trick for breaking the ice and grabbing their attention. Ilya is surprised that it's something simple, but she agrees to try it. Just then, Yuki and Ayano walk in, and Yuki asks why Masachika looks like he smelt what he dealt. Masachika points out that her mask is starting to crack and informs Alia not to be fooled by Yuki's acting. Yuki asks if Alia is disappointed in her, but Alia remains calm and asks if she was serious about remaining friends with her. When Yuki says she was, U says she's fine with it. She then reveals that she intends to answer why she wants to be student council president. The next day, Yuki chuckles at how forthright Alia is, so Masachika is happy to know she didn't soil her friendship with Alia. Yuki asks if Masachika is mad at her instead, but Masachika says that going after an opponent's vulnerability was such an obvious move, it makes him want to give his pet dog head pats for daring to bite him, while also teaching it a lesson so it doesn't try again. As Masachika's eyes start to look more sociopathic, Yuki wonders if she's awakened a Joker prodigy. Just then, Kenzaki and the other council members walk in to discuss the plans for tomorrow. After clearing the rest of the program, he asks in what order they went to make their speeches. Yuki suggests a coin toss, and when Masachika agrees, she suggests Ayano does it. Masachika rejects it, so Maria offers to do it, and they all agree. They agree that if Ilya guesses right, she gets to choose, but if not, Yuki chooses. Maria flips the coin, and while it rolls in the air, Yuki debates which she should pick. If she lets Ilya go first, she won't get enough applause, but it wouldn't be as satisfactory to feed. But if Yuki goes first, she won't get to see what Masachika has up his sleeve. The coin finally drops, and Maria grabs it, waiting for Olia to make her decision. Alea doesn't give it any thought and picks heads, but it turns out to be tails, and the choice falls to Yuki. Yuki begins to wonder if Masachika's inner psychopath was slipping out to distract her from something. She then realizes that her focus should be Alia, who's emotionally fragile, so she plans to pile on the pressure from that shitshow broadcast. She figures Masachika hopes to go first so they can make it a draw, so she tells Kenzaki she'll go first. The next day, the closing ceremony arrives, and the teachers first give their speeches. Then they call up the council members to give their presentations. Kenzaki gives an impressive speech, followed by Chizaki and Maria, who are more lighthearted. Afterward, the moment they had all been waiting for arrives. Yuki puts her demon face on and walks confidently on stage, only to use her angel voice for the speech. After introducing herself, some simp already promises her to vote. Then Yuki goes on to share her vision with them. She intends to make an academy where the students' opinions matter. She then pulls up a suggestion box and points out that even though they're all over the school, no one actually makes any suggestions. She then asks if they think it's a waste of time and nothing will get done. The audience agrees with that last part, while Masachika and Alia wonder what Yuki's trying to cook. Yuki admits that most council members are busy with other tasks and don't give enough attention to student needs, but she promises that when she's president, all their wishes will be fulfilled. She then begins to list out various events they could alter and even suggest a Halloween or Christmas party, which piques the audience's interest. As her last point, she reminds them that she's already been council president in middle school, so she's well equipped with the balls to pull it off again. At this, the crowd goes crazy while Masachika laments her cheap tricks to get them excited. Ayano then steps on stage to give her speech, and people are stunned by how beautiful she is. She gives a carefully curated, almost robotic speech about how sweet and kind Yuki is, which are lies even the devil couldn't make up. Masachika isn't the least bit surprised, but Alia is surprisingly doing fine too. Masachika reminds her that this phase is merely a greeting to the audience, while Ayano and Yuki round up their presentation with lots of support from the crowd. Next up is Alea, but the audience barely pays any attention till they hear her rambling on in Russian and wonder if they're in the wrong room. Once she's gotten their attention, she jokes that she somehow defaulted to speaking Russian, and the students laugh at her joke. This plan was all Masachika's idea, and it had worked masterfully well. Now that she's got them on her side, Alia begins her speech that admitting that she's got zero track record and is barely fit for the position. However, she boasts that she's someone who works harder than everyone else. She admits some of her mistakes, but insists that she's learned from them and even helped her classmates win the Best Attraction Award board. Suddenly, Alia recalls all Masachika has done to encourage her. So she holds her head up high and promises to make up for where she lacks, or else she'll pull out from the race. The entire crowd is captivated as Ilya tells them to keep an eye out for her as she becomes the president they deserve. By the end of it, Ilya has managed to win them over, and he can earn a simp of her own. Miss Achika tells Ilya she was cool as hell. Then when it's his turn, he says it's time to win. As usual, Miss Achika starts with an unfortunate joke that got the crowd all riled up. He then addresses the question of why he switched from supporting Yuki to supporting Ilya. He asks them what type of person they think should be president, then lists some generic character traits he'll find on Google. However, he insists that it should be someone with enough charisma to draw people to them. The crowd listens closely as he points out that even though Ilya's speech was awkward as hell, it was also genuine and heartfelt. The more he speaks, the more the audience seems to come around till he whips out his ultimate weapon. He states that when Ilya wins, Taniyama and Miyamate would join her as council officers, which shocks everyone including Yuki, who didn't see it coming. He calls them on stage to show it's all true. Then Ilya joins them, and they all take a bow together. The crowd goes wild in support, and Miss Achika tells Ilya that she made this happen. After Taniyama says she won't be assisting their campaign anymore, but Ilya promises to earn her approval. After they leave, Ilya looks at Yuki with a newfound confidence. So Yuki admits that they were outdone. She admits defeat for that day, and Ayano tells her she's giving boss vibes. Later, Masachika checked his placement on the school board, but he placed 33rd and lost the bet. Ilya suggests they head home, so while they leave, Masachika asks what one thing she wants from him, but Ilya says she'll think up something. He reminds her of the hint she gave him in Russian, but when Ilya starts stuttering, he figures she didn't think he would lose. They head to their lockers, so Masachika suggests that since they're running mates, she should call him by his given name so they look like a close-knit team. They both get shy, but when she tries it out, Masachika has a hard time keeping it together. When they go outside, Masachika can't bring himself to look her in the eye, but he asks if she'd like to do more election preparations over summer break. Ilya then gets up close and asks him to look at her as she accepts his proposal. Thanks for watching. Want more anime recaps? Subscribe to channels and turn on notification bell. See you later. Watch those next videos.